During parent-teacher night, my mother told my 7th grade teacher, "Don't waste your time on her, she's the idiot in the family." Mrs. Delgado had just finished telling my mother that I had the highest overall average in the class and that I was one of the strongest math students she had seen in 11 years of teaching. My mother flipped the report card over and pointed at the 80 in science. She said her son Kian was the smart one and that I should be grateful the school didn't hold me back for a grade like that. Mrs. Delgado tried to explain that one subject didn't define a student and that my scores everywhere else were exceptional. My mother folded the report card, put it in her purse, and said she wasn't interested in hearing excuses for a child who couldn't pass a basic science test. Kian was in 9th grade. He pulled a 90 in biology, and my mother acted like he had cured a disease. She told everyone at church and at family dinners that Kian was going to be a doctor. She bought him a microscope and signed him up for a $600 summer program at the community college. I asked for a $12 math workbook, and she said I didn't need to waste money on something I was already good at. The goal was to fix what was broken, not celebrate what was easy. Being good at math was meaningless. Being good at science was the only thing that mattered, because science led to medicine. She told me once she'd wanted to go to nursing school when she was young but couldn't afford it, and that was the reason she pushed Kian so hard. She never said she pushed me at all. She didn't. I was the spare child, the one who existed next to the one she was actually building. What my mother didn't talk about was that Kian was terrible at math. He could memorize the parts of a cell and label a diagram of the digestive system, but the second numbers were involved, he froze. When he started chemistry in 10th grade, he came home with a 58 on his first exam. My mother panicked and told me to start helping him. She didn't ask. She said it was my job as his sister, and I was good with numbers, so I might as well be useful. I sat with Kian every night for 2 years going over chemistry math, then physics formulas, then pre-calculus assignments. I taught him stoichiometry and unit conversions, and how to break a quadratic into its parts. Every test he passed had my fingerprints on it because I was the one who broke the material down into steps he could follow. His grades stayed above passing, and my mother credited the summer science program and Kian's own determination. She never mentioned me once. When it came time for college, my mother sat us both down and said she had saved $18,000. All of it was going to Kian's tuition because pre-med required more investment. She said I could go to community college or get a job because my grades in everything except science wouldn't lead anywhere important. I had a 3.9 GPA. I had the second highest math score in my graduating class. I had already applied to 4 universities without telling her because I learned a long time ago that asking her for support meant hearing a speech about Kian's future. 2 weeks before graduation, I received a full academic scholarship to a state university based on my math and analytical reasoning scores. My mother didn't say congratulations. She said it must have been a low applicant year. Kian started pre-med that fall at a school 40 minutes from home. I moved into a dorm 2 hours away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't sitting at the dining table every night teaching Kian math he should have learned on his own. The first semester, he failed college calculus with a 39. My mother called and told me to come home weekends to tutor him. I told her I had my own coursework and couldn't commute 4 hours every Saturday. She said I was being selfish, that Kian's career mattered more than whatever I was studying. I told her I was studying applied mathematics. She said she didn't even know what that meant. Kian retook calculus and got a 44. The university told him he couldn't advance in the pre-med sequence without passing it. He switched to a paid tutor, but the tutor used textbook methods and Kian couldn't keep up because for years I had been the one building shortcuts around exactly where his brain got stuck. He failed a 3rd time. After that, Bailey's calls went from twice a week to every single day. Voicemails that started with guilt and ended with demands. I drove home one weekend on my terms, 1 session, 1 weekend. That was it. When I pulled into the driveway, there were 4 extra cars along the curb. I sat in my car for a second staring at them because I knew exactly whose they were. Bailey had invited 3 of my aunts and my uncle to dinner. She put her arm around my shoulder, which she almost never did, and announced to the room, "See, she knows where her priorities should be. Family comes first." Nobody asked me about school. Nobody asked me what I was studying. The whole dinner was about Kian. My uncle said he knew a guy who failed organic chemistry twice and still became a surgeon. Everyone was patting Kian on the back. Bailey sat at the head of the table looking proud, like the whole thing was already fixed just because I had shown up. After everyone left, Kian and I sat at the dining table with his calculus notes open, and I could tell right away that something was really wrong. I wrote out a basic algebra problem on a piece of paper, something a high school freshman could solve, and he stared at it like I had written it in another language. He couldn't factor a simple expression. He couldn't even distribute a negative sign without second-guessing himself. The foundation I had spent 2 years building for him in high school was just gone. He had memorized my shortcuts. He had never understood why any of them worked. The second I wasn't there to hold it together, it all fell apart because there was nothing underneath. I grabbed a fresh notebook and started writing a study plan anyway. He watched me write and got quiet. Then he said something he had never said before. He said, "I'm sorry Mom put so much on you. I know it's not fair." I stopped writing. I looked up at him. His voice was soft and his eyes were down, and it was the first time in my entire life that my brother had said out loud what I had been feeling for years. I just nodded. I went to bed feeling lighter for the first time in years. Then Saturday morning came. I could hear Bailey on the phone before I made it down the hall. Through the half-open door, her church voice carried, that mix of gossip and performance she always put on. "Oh, she's home now." I had to practically drag her back. She was off at that school doing God knows what with numbers while her brother was struggling. Always been the difficult one. Kian's the one with real ambition. She should have been here months ago. I stood in the hallway and didn't move. Something locked into place inside my chest, the kind of feeling that doesn't unlock. I walked into the room and she didn't even flinch. She said, "I didn't say anything that wasn't true. You should have come home sooner." I said, "I had the highest GPA in my department last semester." She waved her hand the way she always did when I said something she didn't want to hear. GPA doesn't mean anything if you're not using it for something that matters. I picked up my bag. I walked past Kian, who had clearly heard the whole thing too. I said, "I'm sorry, Kian, but I'm done." I drove the 2 hours back to campus with the radio off and the phone face down on the passenger seat. Bailey called 11 times. I didn't answer one. I wasn't sad. I wasn't guilty. I was clear. 2 days later, a woman from the financial aid office called and told me a family member had raised a concern about my well-being and ability to continue my studies. She asked if I was experiencing any mental health difficulties or financial instability. I gripped the the edge of the table to keep my hands from shaking. I asked if it could affect my scholarship. She paused and said a flag on my file could trigger a review. I knew exactly who had made that call. There was only one person in my life who would call my school and disguise control as concern. The next morning, I went to my academic advisor, Casey, and told him what happened. His face went from confused to angry in 2 seconds. He said a family member couldn't trigger a scholarship review with a phone call, but he would write a letter to the financial aid office vouching for my standing. He said something else that stuck with me. He said, people who need to control you will always frame it as concern. That afternoon, I went to the registrar's office and filed a formal request that no family member be given access to my academic records or enrollment status. The woman at the desk didn't seem surprised, which told me I probably wasn't the first student who had to do something like this. I was filing paperwork to protect myself from my own mother. That's where we were now. A few days later, the financial aid office told me the flag had been removed after they reviewed my academic record and found no basis for concern. On paper, everything looked fine, but I knew Bailey. Losing wasn't something she processed and moved on from. It was something she punished. She would find another way, another angle, another door to push open. So I did the only thing I could control. I kept working. Casey had been pushing me for months toward a national research fellowship in applied statistical modeling. After the registrar visit, I threw myself into the application. He sat with me for 3 hours refining my proposal and told me my work was stronger than half the graduate students he advised. For the first time in my life, someone with actual authority was investing in my future the way Bailey had invested in Kian's. A few weeks later, Casey called me on my way out of class. His voice was lighter than I had ever heard it. He said, I just got off the phone with the fellowship committee. You're a finalist. 3 of them. You're the only undergraduate. The other 2 are master's students. I sat down on the nearest bench and stared at the trees across the quad. It was mine. Bailey hadn't built it. Kian hadn't benefited from it. No one at home had heard about it. Just me and my work. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, Kian called me. Almost 11 at night. There was a long pause on his end and then he said, they pulled me out of pre-med. After 3 failures in calculus, the science department had officially removed him from the track. They recommended he explore other majors. His voice was flat when he said it, like he had practiced the words enough times that they didn't hurt anymore. Or maybe they hurt so much he had gone numb. Then he said, Mom doesn't know. I've been telling her I'm still in pre-med. I closed my eyes and pressed the phone against my ear and felt 2 things at the same time that didn't go together at all. The first was anger, because Kian was a grown man lying to our mother about his entire academic career, and that lie was going to blow up in a way that would touch everyone around it, including me. The second was pity. I knew exactly what that conversation would look like. I knew the disappointment wouldn't be quiet or private. It would be loud and public, and it would reshape how Bailey saw her own son. He had always been the one she looked at with pride. He had never been on the other side of her judgment, the side I lived on. He was taking general ed classes, English composition, intro to psychology, a history elective, and telling Bailey they were prerequisites for upper-level biology. Lie after lie, stacked into a tower that was already leaning. I told him she was going to find out. He said, can you just not say anything? Please, I'll figure it out. I said okay, but I knew exactly what this was. A bomb with a timer. A week later, Bailey called and told me to come home for Thanksgiving. No excuses. Then she said, and wear something nice. Your aunt is bringing a friend who works at the hospital. I want Kian to make a good impression. A hospital contact at Thanksgiving. The stage was being built. The play was being cast. I called Kian. I said, Mom is inviting hospital people to show you off. You need to tell her before then or she's going to find out in front of everyone. He said, I can't. I literally can't say those words to her. She'll never look at me the same way. I said, she's been looking at me like I'm nothing for 18 years. You'll survive. Long silence, then quiet, almost defensive. That's different. I said, no, it isn't. I hung up. I knew he wouldn't tell her. He didn't have it in him. Bailey had built the lie herself, brick by brick. All I had to do was stop holding it up. Gravity would do the rest. Thanksgiving morning, I pulled into the driveway just before noon. The street was already lined with cars I recognized. Through the front window, I could see the dining table fully extended with the leaf in the middle. 12 place settings, folded name cards next to each plate. When I opened the front door, the smell hit me right away. Roasted turkey and cinnamon and butter and something sweet. Maybe a pie cooling somewhere. The whole house felt warm and full, and for half a second, it almost felt like a home I wanted to be in. Then Bailey appeared at the door. She looked me up and down the way she always did, like she was checking for damage. You look thin. Are you eating enough at that school? She turned to one of my aunts before I could answer and said, she's studying numbers or something. I keep telling her she should switch to something practical. I walked past her without a word and set my bag on the counter and stood there for a minute just breathing. Pans and trays everywhere. This wasn't a holiday. This was a production. 20 minutes later, Kian walked in. His eyes were red. His skin was pale. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. He pulled me into the hallway and whispered, I tried to tell her last night. She cut me off and told me she'd already told everyone at church about the hospital contact. I couldn't do it. His hands were trembling at his sides. He shoved them into his pockets and walked back toward the living room. Dinner started at 5. Bailey at the head of the table. Kian in the middle. The hospital administrator right beside him in a seat clearly chosen on purpose. Bailey introduced him to the whole table like she was presenting a guest of honor. He works in hospital administration, and I thought it would be wonderful for Kian to meet someone in the field. My son is finishing up his pre-med coursework. We're already looking into residency programs. I watched Kian's color drain all at once like someone had pulled a plug. The administrator smiled and asked, so what year are you in the program? Kian's mouth opened and closed. I'm, still working through some of the foundational courses. Bailey jumped in. He's being modest, top of his class in biology. I took a bite of food and said nothing. The administrator kept going, friendly. What's your focus going to be? Internal medicine? Surgery? Kian flicked his eyes across the table at me, desperate. The look of someone drowning who wants you to throw them a rope. I looked back, steady, calm, and didn't rescue him. Bailey filled the silence. Kian has been studying nonstop. He's very dedicated. Then one of my aunts turned to me. What about you? What are you studying? Bailey waved her hand, that same dismissive gesture she had been making my entire life, and said, she does math. It's a hobby, basically. I set my fork down on the edge of my plate, carefully, almost gently, and I said, calmly, with no anger because I didn't didn't need anger for this. I'm a finalist for a National Research Fellowship in Applied Mathematics, the only undergraduate selected. The other finalists are graduate students. The table went quiet, not polite quiet, real quiet, the kind where everyone stops chewing at the same time. Bailey blinked. Once, twice. Then she laughed. That short, tight laugh she used to shrink things. Well, that's nice, but it's not exactly saving lives, is it? My aunt didn't let it go. She looked right at me. Actually, that sounds incredibly impressive. Bailey's face tightened in real time. The muscles around her jaw, the way her lips pressed together. She didn't like that someone at her table was looking at me with respect she hadn't approved. And then Kian spoke. His voice cut through the room like a crack in glass. Mom, stop. Every pair of eyes landed on him. His voice broke on the next sentence. I'm not in pre-med anymore. I got dropped from the program. I failed calculus 3 times. I'm taking general ed classes, and I don't know what I'm doing. Bailey's mouth opened. No sound came out.